Well, hello, welcome to Drawing with Fire. I'm Valarie, your neighborhood pyrography artist, and today we're going to be etching out the carbon for my background on the sunflower, doing a quick recap showing what we did before with the Dremel Versatip 2000 hand torch. I blackened in the background, and I'll have a link down in the description and up in the iCard if you missed that. Now we're going to start with laying out my pattern. I used a General's charcoal white pencil. It worked beautifully on the carbon and raw wood to lay down the lines that I kind of wanted to follow for the blurry background. I didn't want to remove too much carbon and damage the wood more than I had to, and used the 4-in-1 eraser to lift up the pastel charcoal where I didn't want it, and it worked fabulous. I will definitely be doing this again in the future. So now we start with the etching or carving out. I'm using a sandpaper stick. I don't know any other term for it. I don't know the name of it. You can pick it up at a hardware store, and it is about 80 grit. You can remove and add new different sandpaper grits to work with it. And then I also use these cheap chisels from Michaels. They're just craft chisels. It worked wonderfully in removing the carbon. It sometimes would catch, and so I would sand down with 400 grit and keep on going. It really did a beautiful job removing the carbon from the board. It did go a lot quicker than I expected it to. And you will also see me pull out the hand torch. I cut most of that out, but I wanted to leave this part in for context. There's areas that I have to darken up and get closer to the charcoal in order to kind of balance it out. So I go back and forth between burning and carving out, etching out. And that sandpaper stick really worked well for me. I did bring out the Dremel and the Rotary tool later on, and we'll take a look at that. But it was really enjoyable to remove the carbon. I just put on some music and just started removing away. And I really like how it turned out. Looking at the screen on the right side where I'm working, that board was really hard to work with because of the grain. It's not as even as the other boards that it's glued to, and so I'm kind of fighting and scraping and scratching, trying to get it as even as I can. There's a couple of times that the chisel got caught on the grain and had to be really careful because I'm keeping it at a really flat angle so that I don't gouge the wood. That's not what I'm looking for. I want to keep this as smooth as possible. I do use both sides of the chisels. The not as sharp side did a great job scraping down towards me along the grain, and of course, using it upright properly worked beautifully too. So in this video, I don't show all of the etching out that I did because it's really all the same technique. I'm trying to go with the grain as much as possible, even though when I'm using sandpaper, I'm having to go against the grain at times or perpendicular to it. I am trying to use the chisels to smooth out those marks as well, because it can get a little frustrating knowing that if I seal it in this way, it could really show the scratch marks, and I don't want that. So I keep going back and forth trying to get this as smooth as possible. Looking from this angle on the burnt part where we burned with the torch, you can really see not only the grain, but you can see the unevenness. And right now I'm really not worried about that. I can see the gouges too that came with the wood, as well as where the seams are for the glued pieces together. I'm hoping that once we've colored this and ready for sealing, and using either a matte or satin polyurethane, that the glossiness will even out. I do go back and forth with the torch in order trying to get that as even as possible and to mitigate how much of a halo is in the areas, which is another reason why I was scraping out. I do have to fight the halo around the main sunflower, and actually in my next video I do have that as well. I think I did a pretty good job. I was frustrated at the beginning, but now I'm actually quite happy with how that part turned out. As you can see, I'm really fighting with this grain. I'm going back and forth, sandpaper, chisel, over and over again, trying to get it as smooth as possible. And this part of the grain really did want to fight me. I definitely suggest, if you're going to try this technique, to do it on a board that is all one piece, not a piece that is glued together, because you'll be fighting the same issues as I am. So I've moved on to the leaf. I actually did have a little bit of a problem with this one too. I couldn't get it quite as light as I wanted it to be. I was worried about, really digging into the wood. I did not want this to be a relief carving. And so I wanted it lighter, but I was having a hard time finding a balance with this part of it. Surprisingly enough, the chisel did not catch on the seam. I was really happy with that. It was just a smooth continuation of scraping off the carbon. I did not wear a mask with this part. I wasn't kicking up a whole lot of particles. You will see later I show a mask because I'm using the Rotary Tools with that part. I did use a lot of the 400 grit sandpaper, just trying to smooth out the areas, going between the rough sandpaper stick, the chisels, and then the 400 grit, and then right back to the sanding stick again. When using the sandpaper, I had to be careful that I didn't remove some of the area that I didn't want removed. So now we're going to switch over to the Rotary Tools. I started with my Dremel. I used the nylon bristle brush to remove the carbon. I had to be careful because this was trying to gouge the wood, and it was a little bit of frustration there. I do switch over to my other rotary tool because I was having a hard time also controlling this. I forgot the name brand of this rotary tool, so I'll leave that down in the description if I can find it. It was easier to handle than the Dremel. It's more like a pin, so I can move around a little easier. It's still grabbing, the wood is still grabbing the tip. So this was just a quick look at how I removed the carbon from the background on the sunflower. And here's the picture of a final piece. Happy burning, guys. Bye.